Looks like we have a pretty small group today. I just reposted on our Facebook, hoping to capture some folks that might be on Facebook. um, but we can go ahead and get started, and hopefully folks will start joining soon. But thank you all for being here. Um, so greetings, everyone, and welcome to the June listening sessions for the California Truth and Healing Council. Today's listening session is designated as the Eastern region. We had the Southern region was yesterday, and then on Monday we had the Central region listening session. Tomorrow will be Northern, and then Friday will be a regular meeting of the council with public comment taking place from 3 p.m. So that's 1 hour, as well as throughout the agenda. My name is Loretta Miranda, and I am a descendant of the Morongo Band of Mission Indians. I am Serrano and Cupeño. I currently serve as Chief Deputy Tribal Advisor and Special Counsel for the Governor's Office of the Tribal Advisor. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that the land I'm joining you from is the home of the Nisenan and Miwok peoples. Christina Snyder is the Governor's Tribal Advisor. She is unable to join us today as she has another meeting to attend. We also have Michael Park, who is our office assistant on the line. And I want to ask Councilmember Burris if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Anthony Burris, and I am a member of Ione Band of Miwok Indians, and I am one of the council members representing the Eastern region. And then I'm also a PhD student at UC Davis, and I just found out I'll be on the NAGPRA committees for the UC system for UC Davis. I do want to take a second to say, that seeing those committees is a pretty emotional moment for me and probably some other people, because looking at those committees, so many of them are now majority Native because of the 3.5 composition of tribal reps, and then a lot of the UC reps. I'm on there as a UC rep, so because a lot of the UC reps are also Native, we have a lot of Native representation in those committees now. So it feels like the tides are changing, and along with the new legislation in the state, hopefully we can start doing some of the work we were expecting 31 years ago when NAGPRA first passed. Just throwing that out there for a second. So yeah, and I'm just doing a lot of different work for the Miwok Nisenan tribes in the Sacramento region. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. And at this time we're a really small group, so if folks want to introduce themselves, please feel free. If not, that's also completely fine. Oh, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. I finally got my computer fixed, and been able to speak the other day. I wasn't able to when I joined in. So my name is Louise Miranda Ramirez, and I am the tribal chairwoman for Ohlone Costanoan Esalen Nation. We're not federally recognized, but we are very active, and we're from Monterey County.
I'm happy to see your face now. I'm glad that your computer started working and we can hear you.
Yeah, it was pretty hard not being able to speak and cutting out, and had a lot to say, but wasn't able to. So good thing there's not too many people today. I can say more.
Exactly. This is your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves? All right, so I'm going to now briefly walk through some of the logistics and preliminary business for today's meeting. First, we're recording this listening session, and it's available for public participation via Zoom and dial-in. These listening sessions are being held to increase community input specific to the charge of the council, and we ask that you come to these sessions prepared to engage in a thoughtful way that will further the effectiveness of the work. We envision these sessions as ultimately being working sessions that are part of the council rather than opportunities for public comment. As a reminder, we're taking notes throughout the sessions, and we'll be providing monthly summary overviews to the council and public to review, which we aim to release prior to the regular meetings, but that may change depending on staff capacity. These summary overviews are not meant to be word for word records or minutes of the sessions, but are being prepared to provide a brief overview of the discussion that took place for the convenience of the council and the public. For those interested in following updates of the council, ongoing updates, including listening session recordings and the summary review documents I just mentioned, will be available at the California Truth and Healing Council Updates WordPress page. And I'm going to go ahead and put that link in the chat. Let's see. You can also, so if you go on this website, you'll be able to scroll down through all the posts and find the overview documents, and in that document itself, there's a link to the recording if you want to, rewatch and hear word for word comments. And you can also get updates on this page. It will post the agendas and all the kind of updates. You can also get updates from the Tribal Advisors Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages. Listening session recordings are available in full, like I just mentioned, and posted at the WordPress. Additional details, including the dates, agendas, and background information, are also available at our Tribal Affairs website. And I am going to put that link in the chat as well. In the future, our office is trying to figure out how to kind of consolidate these two websites so we don't have everything in two different places. So the blog has, we're going to most likely transition into using that for most of the updates. But for now, we have two different websites. If you need technical assistance during today's session, please contact the Office of the Tribal Advisor. Email at, let me put this in here, info.tribalaffairs@gov.ca.gov. If you've not already done so, we'd appreciate if you could change your name to update to say your name and possibly your tribe or organization that you are affiliated with. And when we get to the discussion portion of today's meeting, if you can go on cam, we would appreciate it, just to kind of have that feel of being in the same room. But again, it's not mandatory, so it's totally fine if you don't want to go on camera. At any point during today's discussion, you can ask questions by using the raise hand feature or simply unmuting your line. We're a pretty small group today, so if you can just unmute and jump on in. But if you're using the Zoom app, you could raise your hand using the controls. And if you're using a Windows computer, you can also use Alt-Y. And if you're on a Mac, Option Y would be to raise or lower your hand. You can also direct message myself or Michael or the whole group with any comments that you have, or let us know that you have a comment, and we'll either read that comment into the session or call upon you. We're saving the chat and using that to help draft the report. So if you have comments that you want to put in the chat, please feel free to do so. If you dialed in, which I don't think anyone has dialed in today, but you can unmute your line by using *6. You may also email written comments to that email address that I put in the chat at your convenience. And this is at any time. If you have any comments, you can feel free to email those to us. Now that COVID-19 restrictions have begun alleviating, we'll be looking into having listening sessions both via Zoom and in person in meeting locations throughout the 4 geographical regions in the state. In anticipation of this, if there are any community gathering spaces or locations that you recommend, or if you'd like to host a session, please reach out to us at that email address. And we'd be happy to look into that once we figure out how to do in-person and hybrid things moving forward. Now, before I begin, I'd like to remind all participants that all of our council members, Christina and I in the Office of the Tribal Advisor, who are staffing this work, and many members of you are members of the victim population in need of collective healing. So I ask that you engage with the council, our office, and each other with respect and with your whole heart in a healing mindset. Many of us that are doing this work are navigating systems that were not built for us to make change that was never contemplated. This in itself takes an enormous amount of emotional integrity, patience, and we are all doing our best to make strides in these spaces. So thank you again for joining us. And we do have a brief presentation. I recognize that some of you have seen this presentation a few times, but we'll go through it just in case there are folks that might not be familiar with what the council is and what we're working on. And it's also just a good reminder. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. And I can see the chat, but I won't be able to see if you raise your hand. So we're a pretty small group. Just unmute yourself and jump on in if you have any comments to make. So for the agenda for today, we're going to go over a quick overview of the council and its charge, and then walk through the June council meeting agenda, which is happening this Friday. Go over any updates that we have, and then the fourth item is a listening and discussion section, and that section is just kind of an open dialogue of things that folks came to the meeting to discuss. And then the last item is questions for the public, which we have some questions that are specific to subcommittees and the council scope, and so we'll walk through those. We'll reserve at least a half hour for that portion. And let me move. I have many screens open. Here we go. Okay, so the California Truth and Healing Council is a council that's made up of representatives from California Native American tribes charged with bearing witness to, recording, and examining existing documentation of and receiving California Native American narratives to clarify the historical relationship between the state of California and California Native Americans in the spirit of truth and healing. The council will submit a final report of its findings to the governor's office by 2025. The final report should reflect a holistic understanding of the historical relationship, and the final report may also make recommendations aimed at reparation and restoration and consider how to prevent similar depredations and/or policies in the future. The council structure, the council is organized under a charter, and that charter is available at the tribalaffairs.ca.gov website. If you go onto, I believe it's the resources tab, that charter is there. So the council is made up of voting and can include non-voting members. At this time, there are none, but that's an option. There are 12 voting members from each of the 4 regions, with 1 seat for a non-federally recognized designee in each region. Each region has an alternate voting member to ensure quorum for action as well. The council welcomes and encourages all available methods of public participation. Participants are encouraged to attend and observe all meetings of the council, with the exception of any closed session proceedings. Right now, the council does not have any on the agenda, but can do so in the future. Participants are also encouraged to submit written statements to the council, make oral statements and testimony to the council, participate in interactive dialogues, panel discussions, and informal meetings, organize and host affiliate events on issues relevant to the work of the council, and join the work of the subcommittees. And I'll go through the subcommittees shortly. This is just a visual representation of the council structure. So you have the voting members, non-voting, and then public participation and affiliated events. Just a visual to see the structure. The Tribal Advisor's Office is tasked with consultation. And so if you are a California Native American tribe, we're seeking to begin in-person consultation meetings beginning today, where your tribe is comfortable in doing so. Please reach out to our website or our email address if your tribe is ready to meet in person. We're flexible on the method and mode of the meetings, and meetings will be recorded and transcribed. Tribes may share as much or as little information as they are comfortable with. Outside of tribal consultation, the council and our office are available to meet with Native American individuals, organizations, and groups at their request. As far as the council meetings for this year, so initially the council was going to meet on a quarterly basis, but determined that in this year that it served well to meet monthly in order to help set up the foundations for the council's work. And so for the rest of the duration of 2021, these are the meeting dates. So again, this Friday, then July 23rd, August 20th, September 17th, October 22nd, and November 19th. And again, those meetings are happening on Fridays from 1 to 4. Speaking of the meetings, we have our agenda for Friday, and it's a pretty robust agenda. And as I mentioned before, there's a hard cutoff at 3 for public comment. So likely some of these items will be carried over to the next meeting. But we will open up with a welcome, roll call, and traditional opening. We're also going to, June 18th is also the 2-year anniversary of the governor's apology. So we do have some space in there to acknowledge that during the traditional opening. We'll also go into the approval of the minutes, council member updates, and then have a few documents for the council and for everyone to review. And those include a public engagement / public relations guideline and process, a council member code of ethics draft review, and a respectful engagement in meetings and listening session draft review. So how we'll do that is we'll do kind of what I'm doing now, which is share the screen and then kind of walk through and make edits in real time. And then, we can likely it'll go to, the next month for additional review. But this is the initial review of those documents. We'll also have a quick budget update and then spend some time discussing subcommittees. So the partnership funding subcommittee has been stood up by the council, but has not been staffed yet. So it's anticipated that the council will discuss staffing that. And other subcommittees up for discussion and consideration include a disenrollment committee, recognition, and education, which is broken down into 2 subgroups, one focusing on K through 12 and one on higher education. Also perhaps an elders committee and then other. We heard in previous listening sessions, I think initially we had kind of an idea for like an identity subcommittee, which would focus on both disenrollment and recognition, but after hearing feedback, determined that it's best to separate those 2. Also on the agenda, we have contracting principles and public engagement input, next meeting dates, and then public comment, which again will begin at 3. So it's a lot of stuff to tackle in a couple of hours, so it'll likely be carried over, but that's kind of the game plan for Friday. In terms of the budget update, so due to budget impacts and the COVID-19 pandemic, the 2021 enacted budget included $100,000 annually through 2024-25 to support the following activities of the council. So that includes a stipend for council members to attend meetings. Tribal appointees to the council will receive stipends based on their experience, knowledge, and unique circumstances. Also included in that $100,000 was to provide a culturally appropriate wellness service for quarterly meetings. Wellness services from a culturally appropriate psychologist or provider at the regional meetings provide Native participants the tools to process and heal from ongoing historical trauma. One thing the council does not want to do is have these discussions and not have the tools to process a lot of these traumas that will be discussed. Also included in that budget is the live streaming of meetings and transcription of meetings and consultation. So that's, the recording equipment that is in the process of, we're in the process of securing that to provide the public access to the primary materials for the final report and appendices. The council will live stream, record, and transcribe meetings, and it will audio record and transcribe the consultations. So the May revision to the governor's proposed budget has not been passed yet, but it does include a requested additional $350,000 annually. So that's $450 total through 2024-25 to support the following. So the additional funds would support coordinating research and compilation and consolidation of all known resources available within the state library and archives at the direction of and for presentation to the Truth and Healing Council. The researcher will present information to the council at its quarterly meetings, coordinate additional research efforts, and compile appendices for the final report. It'll also support compiling and composing reports of the report of findings and recommendations, which it's aimed at reparation and restoration at the direction of the council for presentation to the governor's office based on current academic and international methodologies. And also it would include council and office travel for consultations, meetings, and subcommittee work. So the subcommittees that the council has created. So first there's the academic partnership subcommittee, And that subcommittee is focused on partnering to for research and partnering with the different academic institutions, and they have met and recommend targeted outreach to academic partners to refine its approach. The subcommittee is also developing a mission and vision statement. The council also created a youth council subcommittee, and that committee has met and seeks additional community engagement to address outstanding questions. And again, we've prepared specific questions for each of these subcommittees. The funding partnership subcommittee has been created, but not yet staffed. And that subcommittee is focused kind of on looking for opportunities and partnering with philanthropic organizations in order to raise funds for other aspects of the council work that's not included in those previous slides I talked about. And as mentioned, when we were going through the agenda, there are some other subcommittees that are currently under consideration. Those include disenrollment, recognition, elders, and education committees. And we are to the listening and discussion, so I will stop talking as much because I think it's most important to hear from all of you guys. And so I'm going to stop sharing the screen or my screen. And this opportunity, I'd like to first turn it over to Councilmember Burris and see if you have any specific questions that you want to ask the group, and to give you a space to do so.
I don't know that I have any specific questions right now. I have a lot of different thoughts in my heads about things, but I don't know if they're really well directed right now. So I don't have any specific questions. Thank you for asking them.
That's perfectly fine. And I don't know if I noted, but I'll be taking notes too. So if you see me kind of gazing off over here, I'm still paying attention, but just multitasking at the same time. But wanted to open it up to everybody and see if there's any specific items that you want to discuss, that you want to make a comment that will be included in the overview document. Just want to leave it open-ended and see if there's anything that anyone came to this meeting to discuss, and I'll give you all space to do that. If you want to introduce yourself as well, you can totally do that at this moment, but I'm going to mute myself and give you guys an opportunity to jump in.
I had a question. Am I muted? No? Can you hear me? Oh, okay. I know it said that the committee is 12. Are there plans on increasing, or is it going to stay with just non-voting?
At this time, there's no plans to increase the voting council members. But yes, the council can include non-voting members as well. And I think just for, everyone's kind of background information, I think the council really, it's the community that's driving the work. The council members are on the committee or on the council, but definitely open to community feedback, because I think that's fundamental to the work. But yes, at this time there's 12 voting members and there's no plans to increase.
Can you tell me who's representing the Central Coast?
So we have, let's see, the Central Coast. I think some of them are included in the Central region. So we have Chairman Kenneth Kahn, Priscilla Katzler-Mata, Chairman Mark Macaro, and Councilmember Alex Manzano. So they're the Central region. Which I don't have the list in front of me, but it's a larger region, and it includes the coast. And so again, that's Chairman Kenneth Kahn, Katzler-Mata, Mark Macaro, and Alexis Manzano. And I'll put a link in the chat so that you can see.
Okay. Because it doesn't seem like there's really anyone representing from San Francisco down to, let's say, San Luis Obispo, for the non-recognized tribes.
All right, I was just getting the link.
Yeah,
There.
sure.
There you go. So that's if you click on that, it lists all the different council members divided by the region. And so Central Region, and again, like recognizing that the state is large and it's impossible to get folks from every single part of the state, but based upon the regions that were, these are who were nominated and appointed today. But I will make note of your comment.
It just seems like there's so many that the size might be a little bit larger. That's
You said that was from San Francisco to San Luis Obispo.
right.
So, appreciative of the comment and have made note of it.
I know we were talking last time about what we believe or the actual state could assist us with. I mean, and I think most of the items are pretty important when we come to an official state recognized tribe. There needs to be a determination of guidelines that instead of just, I mean, there's like 10 tribes in our area. I mean, there was one tribe at one time that had 2,000 members, and most of them were all from Esalen Institute and non-native at all, but being adopted, they were saying they were Esalen. And so I'm just wondering, there needs to be something more official to determine the genealogy, the true people of the area.
So just to make sure I've captured that correctly. So something more official to determine, ancestry, and then also like it seemed like your comment was two different ones, like there needs to be mechanisms for state recognition as well.
Correct. Right. What do we need to do for there to be an understanding? I mean, like, I know with our tribe and with our genealogy how it's been proven, but that doesn't make any difference to anyone. And it's like we should, because if we expect the state to acknowledge us, there has to be some kind of requirements that we can fulfill. It just seems that there should be something. I mean, self-identification, and I realize that sometimes people say, well, we don't have any information. But then there's those of us that do. And so how do we show that difference? I mean, yeah, there's always the verbal history, and then there's the proven one. And there has to be something for people to understand.
Thank you for the comment. Do we have anyone else on the line that wants to jump in and just have kind of like a general discussion about the Truth and Healing Council, and I see that somebody has dialed in. It's a 707 number. If you would like to unmute, it is *6 to unmute your line. If you want to, just wanted to put that out there because I see that we had someone on the phone.
Hilly, this is Kathy Corey Chichansi. First of all, I would like to thank the council for including a subcommittee on disenrollment. I think that's really important. And I have kind of an interesting fact to share with this council and in the listening session. My daughter, who is Chichansi, disenrolled from Picayune, and my son-in-law, who is Pomo, disenrolled from Coyote Valley. They went to the California Museum, not the California Indian Museum, but the California Museum over the weekend. And they have an exhibit currently there on remarkable women in leadership. And upon arriving, the very first large photo was one of Tilly Hardwick. And my son-in-law is a descendant of Tilly Hardwick. I think it speaks volumes to the state of California that she is recognized as leadership and a very strong woman and a very important person within Indian country, yet she was disenrolled from her tribe, even though being the originator of the Tilly Hardwick decision in California. And her descendants remain disenrolled from several Pomo tribes in Northern California. And I would just like to state that, you know, this is just an example of how wrong this is as far as this situation in Indian country with disenrollment. So I just wanted to share that. And once again, thank you for developing a subcommittee for disenrollment. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And so the council is considering a disenrollment committee, and so it hasn't been stood up yet, but that's on the agenda for this week to consider. It's on the list. But just wanted to clarify that it hasn't been stood up yet.
Yes, thank you. And we're hoping it goes that way. So once again, thank you for the consideration.
Thank you, Kathy.
This is Louise again. Based on Kathy's question, it's like we know that the BIA, Department of Interior, whatever, says that it's the tribal government's decision. How would we, as the state, change that? I mean, in our tribe, I know we've tried not to disenroll anyone, and anyone who wants to go to another tribe can. And then we tell them that, okay, you're separating, it's lifetime. But I mean, when you're looking at it as the state, how can you change that when the federal government already has determination on what those guidelines are?
I think this is me thinking, having state or the feds involved with recognition. I think there's many aspects to that, and many arguments against, and having that's something that's, you know, inherently the sovereign right of a tribe. So I think it's very sticky, and so I definitely do not have the answer to that, but I can make note of it in the comments. But it's a very I don't know that the state would, I don't think tribes would want the state to have that kind of authority, or the feds, but that is just a very delicate situation.
I agree. I mean, because I think with every tribal leadership, everyone takes that chance. I believe that once I'm not the chair, they probably try to disenroll me. You know, but it's like, how would we make it stronger that that doesn't happen, or for anyone, you know?
And that could be a, topic of, I think, if there is a disenrollment committee, of course, like having that discussion. I think that could be a part of examining, everything. So comment has been noted and appreciate it. And I see, I paid attention to the participant window and see that we have someone with a raised hand. Raymond Gutierrez, you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like.
Hello, Ray Gutierrez, Waxahachie Indian Tribe. For us, we're putting into our tribal bylaws for disenrollment that it takes 100% consensus vote from the tribe to disenroll somebody, and it takes 100% consensus vote to change that portion of the constitutional bylaws. And a person can remove themselves from the rolls, but aside from that, it takes a consensus vote from everybody that's enrolled. And that's our way of kind of getting around the whole disenrollment issue with changes in tribal government.
Thank you for sharing that. And I know that some tribes, I want to say Creighton has it in their constitution. So there are some tribes that have those mechanisms. And thank you for sharing your bylaw language. And I see Ken, you are unmuted. Go for it.
Ken, Waxahachie Indian Tribe. I'm wondering, how much does the state monetarily support tribes that are recognized? I think that's one vehicle we could look at also. How much funding does the state give to tribes? I don't want to attack tribes that have membership issues, but I think that's something we need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken, for your comment. Does anyone else have any general comments to make, or we can start going through the questions that we have? And I see you're unmuted, so I'll go ahead and mute myself. Ken, oh, I see you're muted again. All right, let me go back. Unless you have something to say, go for it, Ken.
Oh, no, I don't. I just saw the done speaking.
Oh, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and put up the questions. First, actually, I'm going to put, so we have a fillable form that has these questions on it. So you can go ahead and, oh, I see. Thank you, Michael. So yeah, you can follow along with the questions on this form, or you can follow along with the questions that are posted on our website, or at a later time, check out our fillable form and you can go ahead and input your answers there, and it's anonymous. So if you want to go ahead and do that, you can do that at any time. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing again. Current slide, okay. And when I'm in this mode, I won't be able to tell if people can if we're raising their hand. So Michael, if you happen to see that, if you could jump in, that would be awesome. But folks, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself and go for it instead of raising your hand. So general questions for the public about scoping the council's work. So again, the council's charge is to receive, examine, and report on the history of the state's negative actions towards tribes through the native lens and experience, and recommend remedial measures that can be taken. So what the council is interested in hearing about is what early state actions should the state be most accountable for from the native perspective? Also, what state actions have been the most harmful to today's California Native peoples? And lastly, are there any community organizations or conferences that are aligned with the council's work that the council can plug into? Meaning that, the council can collaborate with, present to, use for, outreach opportunities, anything like that. But if you guys want to address any of these, I will mute myself and give you all a moment to jump in.
If I could speak to what state actions have been most harmful to today's California Native people. And for us, I'm not speaking for all, but for us, it's the removal of our lands, our homelands, because it's doing exactly what they wanted from the beginning, which is pitting us against each other, not allowing us to know each other, not to be together, not to share our language, our culture, to make it an everyday event. So as a non-recognized tribe, we have nothing. We had Mexican land grants through the Treaty of Hidalgo, but that land was removed from us as well. And so I think the worst action is the removal of land, and it doesn't allow us to be the people we need to be together.
Thank you for that. Yeah, as you mentioned, it's not just it's removal and then everyone is separate, and it's your comment. Appreciate it. And go ahead.
I want to also give up other people, but what early state actions should the state be most accountable for? The payment of our people's scalps and heads. It's just so evil, and I think that the 17 cents an acre during the judgment rolls, it just made it so much worse, and I think it's the worst thing anybody could do to cut off your head and scalp you or whatever else. And the state needs to take that accountability, because I know in Mariposa and Monterey counties are where they spent the most money. And so I think that's really the worst thing they should be accountable for.
And agree. That this is just it's a deep traumatic. You sit there and really think about that. We're here still. But thank you for that comment. And I see that I have a comment in the chat from Kathy Corey. And so she said, thank you for sharing your tribes, or I'm not good at pronouncing, but Mitch Gaze, for sharing your tribe's bylaws regarding disenrollment. Like Grayton, you've made a wise decision regarding your people and disenrollment and the discord of destruction disenrollment brings to Native nations. It can be done and should be. Other tribes, such as Robinson Rancheria, who have disenrolled previously, have brought their people home again. Again, it can and should be done. Truly, the same stroke of a pen used to disenroll can easily be used to bring them home where they belong. So thank you for that comment, Kathy. And Ray, I see you're unmuted. You can go ahead and jump on in if you like. I can't see the hand raised, the raise feature. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm reading this question and I'm not really sure where to start, because, every action the state took at its origin, it needs to be held accountable for. There is no most accountable the whole process of settler colonialism and the attempted genocide of our peoples, the state needs to be held accountable for. And it's not possible throughout the state to point to specific incidences from every single tribe in this forum. If that's what the state's looking for, they've bitten off far more than they can chew. Unless they're going to pay us to do it for them. If they want to fund the tribes throughout the state to put this report together to speak to the specific atrocities that impacted our communities, because our communities were very horizontal and each village was very autonomous. And so the impacts to each village is impacting an autonomous group, an autonomous community. And it shouldn't be lumped together. We can do that, but I think that dilutes what our people have gone through. I mean, if we want to point to anything, I mean, we could talk about, how this the original state governor and the legislator went to Washington to lobby against the treaties and had those sealed as state secrets and the impacts of that and land theft. Yeah, I think there's a lot there.
And you're absolutely right that this is a huge, the question that there's not, atrocities that are more harmful in that. And if you address the question that we're going to ask later on about unfunded needs. And so if I heard you correctly, I think you mentioned that, some area that's not funded right now would be to financially support tribes to kind of gather all that information and do their own research and, on these specific that happen. And so that comment speaks to kind of that unmet financial need too. I think you kind of like preempted my question, which is later on, but it's appreciated and thank you for that.
I'd like to thank Raymond. When you're reading these, it's definitely the worst thing that I found. But there are more, definitely, and it's something that the Healing Council will have to address, and it's each item. If each of us came up with an item that we thought needed to be addressed, I mean, yeah, the removal of land, we don't have any land. The destruction of the burial sites is important. I mean, there's just so much. To me, I mean, it's like just the fact that they killed our people just for the heck of it. I mean, the vagrant laws, that our people walking around could become criminals, become slaves, and for doing nothing. So each of us needs to think about something that is bad. I mean, I think that was really worse, but we have stories of our people being hung as well in Monterey. And so it's, and we all have those stories. And so it's mostly like you said, you're writing down each item. So it's not that one is more important than the other. To me, that was important. To Raymond, thank you, because we all need to come up with something, and we all feel differently. So we all have to have ideas to give to you, to take back to your council.
Thank you for that comment. And I think, I mean, this is an enormous undertaking, and it's hard to, I think the council is looking for really specific, like getting ideas about, different state actions to begin to scope the work of the council, because it is, it's massive, but there has to be some way to kind of start tackling. And it's, there were discussions about, do we start at a certain date? Do we take it by different issues and go from there? And so I think this is, a really important conversation that we're having as far as getting the community's input so that the council can start to tackle the work, because this is a massive and, the first undertaking in the United States, the first state that's giving this space for our community, but it's huge. And sometimes when I think about it, I start like thinking like, how am I going to help with this? But it's much needed, but it's hard to develop that scope. And so the council is, appreciative of hearing everyone's input to start to tackle this, because it's huge. And does anyone else want to jump in about the scope? If not, we can move on to the next slide. But of course, like even if we move on to the next questions, if you have something you want to say about the scope, please feel free to do so. I don't want to, keep it all organized and have to talk about specific topics, but just want to move through the questions so that we have, different ideas. Oh, and I see Councilmember Burris has unmuted and gone on cam. So I'm going to mute myself.
I kind of have some thoughts about all this, because we're talking about, what can the state do for issues of disenrollment? Well, we don't want to intrude on tribal sovereignty, right? So that's why it's a sticky issue, as you say. And then we're also talking about everything that's happened, and it all relates to loss of land. It all relates to those treaties. If those treaties were in place and we had lands we were supposed to have in the first place, no tribe would feel the need to disenroll anybody, right? Because there's this view that it's a small slice, that we have a little bit of pie, there's not enough to go around. And I think that drives some of these disenrollment issues. So no, the state shouldn't necessarily be involved in withholding funds from tribes or doing punishing acts in regards to disenrollment, but maybe they should be in the business of making sure tribes have enough that they don't feel the need to do that in the first place. So I think that's something that the state can do, assist us in getting land back. I mean, that's what it all comes down to. Land is resources. Land is, economic well-being. So, even when we don't want to intrude on tribal sovereignty in any way to affect these enrollment issues, I think making sure tribes have enough, for all their members and have the resources that they need is, something that we can be looking at. And that's just a thought I was having while we were talking about this.
Thank you, Councilmember, for that. That's really well said.
I think if we're going to talk about land back in California, going to whatever becomes of the California recognized tribes, just as like a definition from the state, then we also need to talk about how do we have that land removed from the tax base so that it's not taken from tribal communities once they get their land back. Yeah, that's it.
And you bring up a really important point about land back, because how can it's like setting some tribes up for failure if you give land back, but then there's still taxes on that land. And if they don't have the infrastructure because of, all these historic depredations, then it's a huge issue. And so I made note of that comment, and it's much appreciated.
I'd like to say, we talked about the land based on the treaties. Well, we weren't included in the treaties. The coastal tribes weren't included, but our land was. And our homelands were like given to the Yokuts. And so how is that right? We're not federally recognized. So when you talk about federally recognized and non-recognized, we still existed. The land was taken, but yet it was given to other tribes on paper on those 18 treaties. So that needs to be corrected as well. We can't just go by the 18 treaties. Yes, the treaties affected us, but differently. They took our land and gave it to other tribes. So I wouldn't say, hey, let's follow through with those 18 treaties and all of our homeland be given to the Yokuts. But it's like, so there's different parts of those treaties we need to think about as well.
And thank you for bringing that point up, that it's not just, there needs to be a hard look at the 18 treaties too, and to make sure that record is also correct. I think there's, multiple issues there. First, the treaties that in and of themselves were, kept away, and but then also that's a good point to also examine and all of that. So much appreciated. I guess if we move into the academic partnerships, and again, like, feel free to jump in with any other comments, but looking at the academic partnership committee, a subcommittee specifically, I think the subcommittee is interested in knowing what the goal for the final report should be. And as I mentioned before, I think some of the goals are aimed at restoration and reparations, but also wanting to hear specific other goals, such as, I think, land back. Like we've kind of heard some of these things, but that is one question that the subcommittee had. Also, how should the council frame its research agenda? How can the council be most inclusive in incorporating research and narrative into this work? Are there any preferred academic partners that the council should be speaking with, or preferred models? And conversely, academic partners that the community does not want the council working with or recommends against? How should the council archive testimony received? Where should this data and information live? I think other international, truth and reconciliation commissions have made the choice to not house those within the state. But I think there's other, we're open to community feedback on where that archive testimony should live. Also, are there any higher education serving community-based organizations or conferences that the council can plug into? So I'll give folks a second to discuss or to think about this and jump on in. And again, if you have other comments on the scope, please feel free to jump in too. I'll mute myself.
Hi, this is Louise again. I'm definitely not academic, but when I look at the first question, I said, what should the goal of the final report be? The goal should be that it become law, it become everything that it should be based on should become law. I mean, what else do we call it? I mean, we just don't want it to be another book, another report. The work being put in there should be what should actually happen. That's just what I can say.
Thank you for that. And I think that's, exactly, we've heard that before, that, we don't want this to end up on a shelf somewhere, and all this hard work not be actualized in making change. So I think, now I'm just answering the questions, but it needs to have teeth. It needs to have something that makes a change. And so thank you for that. And I'll mute myself in case anyone else wants to jump in.
Hello, Ken Woodrow, Waxahachie Indian Tribe. The information you've already gathered on these meetings, have you came up with certain selections so far with that, with all the information that's being provided academically? I know we've been discussing this for months. Is there a list at all so we can review that list and see if we like those agencies or reporting institution? Like, you know, California State Library has a lot of information on my people. The feds have a lot of information, the archives. Can we also go into the archives? Because our information is held at the BIA, which is held at the National Archives. It's really hard to get all that information unless it's being released. There's a lot of confidential information, 72 judgments, 1972, because they are confidential. The 1950s, they're confidential. It takes quite a while to get that information. You have to show your ID, who you are, because they're afraid they're still alive. BIA controls all 28 applications. So if you ask the BIA for a 28 application or any other application, you're going to get blacked out because they're saying they're still alive. There's a possibility they may still be alive unless you prove a death certificate. So, you know, I know my ancestry. I have a 72 judgment. We have probates, allotment lands. We have historical records, ethnographic studies, going all the way back to the treaties. The 56 treaties, I'm interested in the state of California because that was provocated by the 1851 and 52 treaties. We're supposed to get our land back, and our ancestors said it's time for those treaties to become real. That's why California created that whole genocide. They wanted to wipe us all out, the whole state, not just my tribe, but every native out there. Every native had a probation officer. That's another form of control. That's what the state and the county did. I mean, I had people living, my ancestors way up in the mountains, but for some reason they had a probation officer. So that's why I'm looking at too. How much did the state influence have on the county, or was it the county influence on the state to control my people? You know, like I mentioned yesterday, my mother went to went to boarding school, you know, and we discussed that all three agencies or three forms of government, state, county, and feds were involved. So there's a lot of records out there, but getting those records takes years and years and years as a tribal person to understand. We also have probates that were done. We cross-reference those. Basically, 2 reservations were created for us, but we never attended because they weren't in our homeland. You know, we had Indian farms all along the rivers. Those were also Fed supported, but now they don't exist. We don't even see them on the maps anymore. We have to research them. So what was my main point is we need that information, and there is a lot of information out there. There's just a lot of digging. You know, I seen Spanish records referring to us. You know, what criteria does the state want to show as a tribe? I mean, we have the 83 process, which is a good way to show, because we know basically who our tribal members are. But, you know, just like you had Spanish treaties, they designated who was members of the tribe. So what am I pointing at is all the information we can gather is very expensive and time consuming. And we do have state archives. We have local libraries. We need to generate that information for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And again, I think that speaks to, you know, that's research of one specific tribe, and then, you know, council's charge is to examine all of it. So I think it just speaks to like the volume of, you know, how the council is going to start tackling this work, because it's everywhere, and they're tasked with collecting records and examining and correcting the historical record of the relationship between the state and tribes. I think it's Your point is well taken, and thank you for that. Are there any folks on the line have any ideas about nonprofits, community-based organizations that are serving higher education, or like in the higher education realm, I guess would be a way to put it? Does anyone have those agencies that come to mind, or those nonprofits that we could potentially look into partnering with?
I don't know about agencies, but Kyle White from Michigan State University, he's a citizen Potawatomi. He's a really good researcher. He's done a lot more work around climate change impacts in tribes, but his background is in philosophy, and he takes a really good approach at working with communities and works with communities, indigenous communities throughout the Great Lakes region and the northern East Coast.
And that was
Kyle White.
Kyle White from Michigan State University, correct?
Yes.
Amazon.
Much appreciated.
Yeah.
And then what should be in the final report? I very much agree with Louise. You know, it needs to be binding to some degree, and it needs to have provisions detailing land back. There needs to be base funding in there for California Native American tribes. It needs to address the hunting rights. So our reserved rights that we've never given up in the state as indigenous people. It's kind of a slap in the face that the Department of Fish and Wildlife has their poor Indian fishing license, that if you are technically poor, like living in abject poverty, you can get a free fishing license. And then it needs to address capacity building. You know, our communities have survived all this time, and we've, you know, have been hanging on, and some folks have thrived and some folks are just getting by. So how do we work to build that capacity in our communities so that we can, you know, manage our own institutions, so that we can work towards the community revitalization that I think most folks here want? You know, how do we bring our languages back? Well, we need the capacity to be able to manage those programs. You know, how do we restore our relationship to the land? Well, we need the capacity to be able to manage the grant funds, to have that relationship, to bring the crews on, to be able to go out and do the work. Yeah. That's my piece.
Thank you for that.
You know, we talk about working with, who are we going to work with? I think we have so many California Native people who have that ability to work with us, that are academic. And I think that we should work within the California system, because they're going to know what we need. They're going to feel closer to what we feel, because the mission system was completely different than the Plains. I mean, all of us, yes, there's a genocide everywhere with the Native people, but I think we have a lot of academic people that are California Indian who can work on this. You know, can I give you a name? No. But I think they're, I mean, I think they're out there, and we can find them. I know my sister Deborah Miranda, is always reading and having all this information, you know. I know Jonathan Cadero has a lot of information. Um, um, oh gosh, I can't even think of her name right now. But there are many. There are many that, because it's going to be history based on each tribe. It's not going to be one general statement. It's going to be real precise, because all of us still had differences. We were each treated differently, and so all that information needs to come together.
And again, me and I are tasked, well, and the council with now that we're in a state of reopening, yeah, doing
I'm not hearing you.
I wasn't saying anything at the moment. Can you hear me now, though?
Yes, there you go.
So looking at the time, I'm going to go to questions for the youth. I hear someone is unmuted, so if you want to say something, I will go ahead and mute myself.
Hi, Loretta. Are you waiting for me?
Jump on in, Robert Levi. We're at the youth.
I'm back like I always had to. Anyway, not so much the youth council, but just listening to the comments that are being posed. Again, we're talking about, if we talk about academia, which yesterday Jolie was talking about. We do need the research, but again, as I mentioned before, it's that systemic racist idea within the California public schools. And again, that's where my wife and I are working in terms of developing curriculum through ethnic studies and the American Indian component, and also with James Ramos's Assembly Bill 1554, which would emphasize California Indian history grades pre-K through 12. And again, that's where we need to get the youth into understanding where we're coming from. And then hopefully with each region and each tribe within California, they can use their resources from Chico, Humboldt, Sac State, UC Berkeley, whatever university is around them, that's the research they can use in terms of getting the curriculum, the lesson plans within the classroom. Again, and I'll put in the chat room, just getting a hold of Toby Boyd, who's the California Teachers Association president. We're just running against them in terms of getting them started to jump on board AB 1554, because we got to head that way in terms of getting our history within California history, because you can't have California history without California Indian history. Also, I'm kind of pulling double duty here today with I'm on ethnic studies presentation or workshop week long. And then my wife just got doing a lesson plan from introducing AIM to the pipeline to now. And I'm just finishing up a citizenship component for ethnic studies. And further on, we're looking at hopefully putting in something about for the junior highs, the comic graphic novels. And we talked about that last time in trying to get the junior high and middle school kids to get involved with American Indian history. And then again, I'll put James Ramos's email in the chat too. So again, you can have questions for him, give him a shout, or just shout and tell him he's doing a great job, which he is. Again, with the AB, what is it? AB 338 with the Father Sarah statue being replaced up at the state capitol, and also AB 945 now. American Indian high school graduates can wear regalia to the graduation. School districts cannot say no to them. But anyway, that's what we're doing. It's positive. We're getting stuff done. And I can hardly wait to maybe get involved with that K-12 subcommittee. Maybe I will. But anyway, thank you. I'm done. All right, I'll put the stuff in the chat.
Thank you, Robert Levi. And yeah, the council, it's on the subcommittee consideration list for education broken down in that K through 12 and then a higher education one. So the council will be considering those subcommittees at the meeting on Friday. And the questions I have on the screen are regarding the youth council. And so you want to read through those while we have a few minutes left. One thing is, how do we reach the youth? Christine and I, we are not that young anymore and don't know how to best engage with youth. Like I created a more colorful graphic for these listening sessions in hopes that it will, catch people's eyes. But want to share ideas about how we can best engage and platforms. I'm going to mute real quick because I could hear some feedback. But I also want to know if there's any key partners that the council can work with to reach Native youth, and should the youth council subcommittee be modeled on the council structure, kind of like a mini Truth and Healing Council, or something else? Should the youth council be focused on California Native youth or open-ended? And importantly, what is a youth? How should the council define it? We've heard different age groups, different kind of groups of age ranges. So very interested in hearing that. And are there any ongoing youth groups or meetings in your community that the council can plug into? We've heard that different health centers have GONA.
Yeah, I'm having problems with volume again. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, I know we were discussing this and this got pretty bad the other day and I wasn't able to respond. And based on being chair, I get calls all the time from young people finding out that were never told before, and they're now finding out that they belong to our tribe. And so I believe that the interest is there, and just because they may not know everything about their culture, they still need to learn. We work to return our language. I started in 2006 with Breath of Life at Berkeley. We've done dictionaries. We do games at our gatherings. We do word searches, so we brought this back. Yeah, there's a lot of things out there that we can teach, but I think they also learn from youth that are involved already. Yes, in Santa Clara County, the Indian Health Center does have various groups. They have drumming groups, they have dancing groups, but most of it, of course, is all relocated Native. But Indian Health does come through with beading classes. There's Conexión that also has youth education. So there is in Santa Clara County a lot of Native events that we participate in. We have a women's society, but that's older. But I think that there's a lot that our youth can learn because it has been kept from them as well. So, it's important to realize that if they're interested, we need to get them in, and not just the fact that they already know everything they think they should know. So I think all youth interested should be able to be on a youth council.
Thank you for those comments. Does anyone have any input on specific organizations? And thank you for mentioning, you know, I think Santa Clara Indian Health has a lot of events and a youth program. But does anyone else have any specific Native youth groups that we might be able to plug into or ask to share our promotional material so we get more youth involvement? We'd definitely love to hear that. Or just what's a youth? Like when you think of a youth, we heard some folks say that, you know, perhaps, you know, 14 and up would be appropriate, but we're definitely interested in all opinions and, you know, if the council should be, you know, 10 and up, just throwing numbers out there at this point, but just want to hear your guys' feedback. Also different platforms. I've joked with the council about having to do TikTok dances to perhaps reach the youth. And I know, you know, aside from joking, I know that TikTok does have a lot of Native influencers that are really getting, you know, getting the word out about Native issues and educating people. But if there's any platforms or different organizations that the council can partner with, definitely interested in hearing that. Then outside of, so the last, or some of the last questions we have are regarding funding partnerships. So again, that unmet need. And I think we've heard that today, that there is an unmet need as far as maybe compensation for, you know, tribal research efforts, or even, you know, travel stipends for folks to attend listening sessions. Like, we just want to hear what the need is to start to game plan about asking different organizations for funds, because if you don't ask anything specific, we can't receive it. So just wanting to hear that input of the unmet need, and recognizing that we're close to time, though, I'm going to stop sharing the screen, but just want to think about the different unmet financial needs, and see if there's any input on that, or the youth questions, or anything in general at this time. And of course, we'll be back here tomorrow for the Northern Region listening session, which starts at 1 o'clock tomorrow. It's the same link. And again, that Google form is in the chat if you want to go ahead and fill that out. Robert Levi says, if anyone has questions or concerns for education K through 12, he's happy to help, and listed his email in the chat. I do want to ask Councilmember Burris if you have any closing thoughts that you want to share with the group, or any statements.
I don't think I have anything specific. I was thinking about something earlier on. Oh, I know. One thing I was thinking is Kyle White was mentioned earlier, and I agree, he's a great resource if you're interested in issues of climate change and whatnot. I actually assigned one of his podcasts to my NAS1 class a couple quarters ago. So I was doing podcasts because we're not having as many meetings because of the COVID thing. So if you just Google his name, there's some really interesting podcasts out there if you want to learn a little bit more about that subject and just want to listen to it while you're doing your housework or whatever, which is kind of what I do with podcasts. So yeah, that's just something I was thinking about earlier. But it was great to see everybody.
Thank you, council member. And again, thank you all for taking the time to share your thoughts and opinions and your perspectives, because this is really important. And again, like, I'm happy that we had some folks join. Please help us get the word out. If you have, family, friends, community members that you want to invite, much appreciate it. we are looking into different PR firms that might be able to help us eventually with outreach, because right now it's kind of on us to promote through Instagram and Facebook, but that can only go so far. So please share. And if you have any comments that you want to share tomorrow or at the business meeting on Friday, please join us there. And again, very appreciative of your time and your comments. And thank you guys. And I hope you have a good day. And see some of you tomorrow.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you.